where we're more authoritative with our preteens, and now we're moving into coaching our teens. And then eventually you launch them, and you are mentoring. You're a mentor, which is the stage of life that I'm at currently with well, they're not children anymore, my young adults. So before we start, let me start with a word of prayer. God, thank you for today. Thank you for each person that's here and those that are watching. Lord, I just pray a blessing on all of us, Lord, that we would fight for our families. Lord, that we would fight the enemies of the principalities of this dark world, because our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against these things. And I pray, Lord, that we would continue to model what the fruits of the Spirit are to our children, that we would model patience and kindness, and Lord, that we could see a generation rise up that just is so in love with you and so in love with others, Lord, that we would just see a generation of just giving people that want to lead others to Jesus. And I just pray a blessing on each parent here tonight and listening. May you give them what they need to allow their teenagers to become kingdom builders. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let me start out with a verse. Proverbs 22:6. Start children off the way they should go, and even though they're old, they will not turn from it. 1 Timothy 4:12. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. There's no doubt that teenagers are passionate, and if they get their passion on the right things, man, they can inspire adults to be on fire for the Lord, and it's exciting. Sean and I grew up in the same youth group together, and there were many times where we would go on youth retreats, and man, there would be this awesome move of God, and we would come back just really on fire, and there would be youth Sundays where we would have a youth preach or do worship or teach Sunday school. And so giving youth opportunities to share that passion in churches, I think, is so important. Obviously, they need mentoring in that, but I think the more we can engage teenagers in that, the better. So let's first talk about teen mania, like what's going on in the teenage brain. There's a lot of things going on in the teenage brain. This is an example. No, I'm just kidding. I will have a video. A video is coming. Let me just see. Right here. Okay, here we go. What's going on in the teenage brain? That slide is a little blurry, but there's lots going on there. They learn from experience. My slide's even blurry here. I don't know how that turned out that way. I apologize. They're trying to learn self-control. They deal with experiences and memories. I'm taking my glasses off because I am no longer a teenager. They seek affirmation. There's just a tons going on, and I'm going to play this video that'll kind of help explain more. But when you think about when you're a teenager, what went on in your brain? I mean, when we're far removed, we start to forget what were we like. Sean and I did a lot of running around together, so Sean's sitting right up front so I can use him as an analogy. But we were impulsive. We were rebellious at times. We were pranking. We were very good at pranking people. That's what a lot of teenagers do. It's pushing boundaries because we want to know. So a lot of people say, what is a child's job? A child's job is to play. That's how they learn. What is a teenager's job? To rebel. Which you're like, well, that's not okay. Correct. However, what they're doing is they're trying to find autonomy. They're trying to find who they are. And so they're pushing boundaries. And so that's a secular version of saying their job is to rebel. But when you really think about it, that's what they're trying to do. I remember as a teenager, there was a young lady who that I worked with, and she wanted to know where I lived. And at first I was like, oh, cool, like she could come over. You know, and then as I'm driving home, I realized, oh, man, she's going to be dropping in when I least expect it. I don't really want her to know where I live. So I knew this back road to my house really well. So this is, okay, I'm glad there's no teenagers listening to this, but maybe there will be. But don't do this, teenagers, if you're listening to this. So what I did is I turned my lights out. She was following me. I turned my lights out and went like 60-some miles an hour down this road, quick pulled into my driveway and just sat there hunched down. And I saw her car go, drove past. And the next time I saw her, she goes, "What happened? I totally lost you." "I don't know. I thought you were following me." And but how stupid is that, right? There was another time where I thought, you know what? I don't feel like going to school today. I'm going to act like I went to school. So I ate breakfast, drove away, and I waited till I knew my mom had left and thought my dad had left, drove back, and as I'm driving to my house, I see my dad's truck parked there, getting into his truck, and I drove past. Now, I had a black and gray, oh my word, Escort, Ford Escort. So you knew this car, and my dad, I needed to say I got in trouble for that. One time, and I think Sean was along for this, but we were with a friend. He had a big green boat of a car, Chris Hurst's car. Do you remember Chris Hurst's first car? And yeah. And so we went and we drove really fast down this back road right near Rocky Ridge. There's this road there. And we drove past a bunch of cops just hanging out talking. And all of a sudden, we were surrounded by cops. And "Where's your license at, young man?" I forgot it. "Do you even have a license?" And I'm sitting in the back going, "Seriously, Chris, you don't?" And then they're like, "Whose car is this anyway?" My dad's." "Your dad's? How about we call your dad down at the station? Would you like that?" "No." Anyway, they scared us really, really bad. So there's been lots of things that we did, and we were impulsive, that crazy stuff. But ultimately, teens learn. A lot of them learn by experience and what's modeled to them. In addition, it's important for parents to balance within themselves and with their parenting, and that balance means just trying to be calm, and yes, you can be direct. I've done this in therapy where I've asked kids, what's the difference between yelling and being direct? And they don't know, and then I play it out for them. Okay, this is yelling, right? "Stacy, how many times I gotta tell you, you don't listen ever?" That's yelling, right? Direct is, "Stacy, how many times? You need to listen," right? That's more direct, right? And so I remember my teenage going, "Why do you always yell at us?" And we're like, "I'm not yelling. Do you know the difference between yelling? Let me show you the difference," right? But they often think they're yelling, right? Because we're being direct. And so it's important to keep this balance, right? And it's important to, again, if you're saying, "Hey, we want you off your screens. You're on your screens too much." And when they go, "Hey, Mom, Dad, I have a quick question." "Yeah." Did you get that? I'm sorry, what was that? Yeah, we're telling them to be off their screens because they're not paying attention. We need to be good examples, right? We really need to be good examples. We can't expect them to follow. We also have to realize that the teenage brain is not fully developed. And so how we respond is going to be key. They're going to make rash decisions. They're going to get moody. And we need to be not too harsh, but not too soft. We need to try to remember what it was like to be a teenager and what the longing or needs were when we were teenagers. What do we want? What do we need? Yes, we wanted some autonomy, we wanted some more freedom, but we still long for a connection. And it's important to walk that line and give that connection. So ask yourselves these questions like, what did you want your parents to meet for you when you were a teenager? How did you want to be treated and shown love? Share stories about your teenage experiences, and also include the embarrassing ones too. Teenagers really love to hear what you did when you were little and how you learned. And there's been many times at our dinner table where our kids would just sit there for a long time just hearing stories about when we were teenagers and the mistakes that my wife and I made growing up. Let's take a moment. I do want to take some time here specifically to talk about what teens are up against today, because what teens are up against today is way different than what we were up against. Even when I worked in youth ministry over 20 years ago, what I saw when I first started youth ministry 20 years ago, I don't want to go that old, but what I first saw kids dealing with to what kids are dealing with now is totally different. So when it first came, there was an occasional person bringing alcohol, swearing, and smoking cigarettes. That was the most that I would see coming out there. Occasionally sexual stuff too, but that was the majority of what I saw. Today, it's a lot different. It's a lot different than what we're seeing. Kids are facing puberty, hormone changes, they're exploring autonomy. That's all hard, but we also have a very loud, intrusive, divisive, tempting, pressuring, confusing culture voice that is speaking to these kids, even when you don't know they're speaking to them. Music, movies, YouTube, and Instagram, Facebook, all these reels, TikTok, please. All of that stuff is teaching our young people. And so we have to be aware of that. Let me just show you a little bit about the teenage brain with this young lady who is a teenager, and she is very well articulate and well spoken, so we'll let her share.
One morning, shortly after my 13th birthday, I walked out into the living room and saw my mom reading 1, 2, 3 Magic Teen, Communicate, Connect, and Guide Your Teen to Adulthood by Dr. Thomas W. Fallon. My first thought was that she doesn't need to be reading this. She knows how to parent me. I'm not going to change. Yeah, I was wrong. The next week I was thinking to myself, what if I wrote a book about parenting? Wouldn't that be interesting? I bet every parent would like to know what their teen's thinking about their parenting. So when this opportunity popped up, I thought this would be a perfect topic to talk about. We'll start with technology, because technology is an area where teens and parents usually don't get along. Mostly because of the difference between technology from today and when my parents were teens. In my opinion, I think a child should get a phone based off on the environment. So what I mean by that, if your child lives in Iowa, kids usually don't need a phone at younger age. But for kids who live in New York City, they have to walk to school and get food in the city, so it's more important to have a phone at a younger age for safety purposes. There's age, but there's also time to consider. For me, I think the time limit should be anything that the parents can handle. What I mean by that, if you are spending 12 hours on your phone and tell your kid you only have 1 hour screen time, there's a problem. Don't set time limits for your kid if you can't follow them too. I mean, come on parents, have a little fairness. A time limit should be anything that you can handle. In order to understand your teen, you need to understand what your teen thinks of you. Some teens describe their parents as certain stereotypes. These stereotypes fall into 2 categories, the boss and the loosey-goosey. The boss is a strict parent that you might hear saying, what I say goes, and when you make the money, then you can make the rules. The loosey-goosey lets anything slide. For example, a teen could stay up all night, but the loosey-goosey wouldn't have a problem with that. Also, a loosey-goosey could also be okay with one thing and be strict on another. For example, a teen could have a very strict bedtime, but have as much screen time as they like. The parent that I like to see is not the boss, nor the loosey-goosey, but in the middle. I call this parent the listener. The listener gives directions, but let their teen have options. The boss and the loosey-goosey aren't bad parents, but the listener takes the good out of these two and then leaves the bad. Imagine your teen wants to quit the basketball team and get a job at McDonald's. The listener would ask questions before the teen would make a decision. The listener would also give directions on places to work if they didn't want them to work that place. But how can you listen to your teen if he or she is so mad? Or how can your teen listen to you if you're so mad? Let's talk about emotions. So, emotions. We all have them. But teen emotions are very special. According to Marwa Azab in her PhD article, Why Are Teens So Emotional?, the part of the brain that controls the emotional system is called the limbic brain structure. The limbic system is slower to develop than our logical system. It takes some time for a teen to connect her emotional system and her logical system. Basically, when I'm feeling sad or mad, the emotions feel very intense. When I'm feeling sad or mad, it feels like a wave has just crashed into me. I'm not thinking why I'm sad or mad, it's just there. One day after tennis practice, I was thinking to myself, I don't really want to join the team. It was a lot of work and it was every day, so I asked my mom about it in the car. She said that we're committed to the team. And all of a sudden, I started crying. I couldn't stop. That wave of emotions just hit me and I cried all the way home. And my mom was so calm about it. That made me even more mad. I was expecting my mom to get really mad at me, but when she didn't, that got me really mad. When I got home and calmed down, I was thinking about what just happened. I just had my first mood swing, and I didn't even know it. So what I learned about parenting from my first mood swing is that when your teen's experiencing a wave of emotions, the key for parenting is to stay calm. If you stay calm, your teen's wave of emotions will pass, and they'll realize that they were being silly. But if you fight back, your teen actually has a reason to be mad. They won't think about how they just had a mood swing, they'll think about how you just yelled at them. So parents, if your teen's experiencing a mood swing, stay calm and realize it's not you, it's emotions. As a beginner teen, I'm starting to learn about emotions, understanding technology, and seeing different types of parents. I also understand since I'm the oldest, my parents are figuring this out too. And by the way, I love my parents, and this is not about how bad they are at parenting. This comes from a variety of places and my realization on, wow, it's really hard to parent a teen. We all experience like what it's to be a teen, but with a little bit of listening, we'll all get to the finish line. Thank you.
We talked last time about the different parenting styles. Oh. Thank you. I totally forgot. Okay, we talked about little parenting styles. Before we get into that, though, I do want to hit some of these things that teens are dealing with. This is from an article, parents.com, by Amy Morin, who's a licensed clinical social worker. Um, like adults, she says, teens nowadays often face social problems. They may also be more susceptible to challenges because their brains are still developing and their bodies are changing quickly. Combine that with the advances in technology, and today's teens are facing new and different social issues than their parents ever have. And so here are some of them. Some of this dysfunction can be linked to technology, especially since the average teen spends more than 8 hours each day using electronic devices. Um, and that's really sad. I mean, if you think about it, when you're driving around, and when it's a really nice day, how many times do you see kids out playing? Do you see that? I don't see it. When I do see it, I smile. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. They're playing basketball, or they're, you know, playing in the yard, or they're doing something, or they're running around, or whatever. Um, but I rarely see it anymore because we have video games, we have our cell phones, we have iPads, and we're just on screens all the time. And so they're on screens, possibly at school all day. Although Ephrata, I just heard, I think it's this year, they're taking cell phones away for the day, which I think is awesome. And I think we're recognizing the problem. Here are the top 10 social issues teens nowadays struggle with. Social media, obviously, number one. Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, again, TikTok, all of these things, they hurt friendships, they cause comparison, they cause just almost like a jealousy of seeing what others have, what I want. We've noticed, research shows that it impacts their mental health. Also, no matter what precautions parents take, teens are likely to be exposed to unsavory people, unhealthy images, and sexually content online. So, that's a big monster out there. So, how do we deal with that as teens? Or excuse me, as parents with teens? Um, Number one is talk about ways to stay safe online. I think, it used to be in the past that we would just say, hey, there's bad stuff out there. Be careful. I think now we need to let these kids know that, hey, you're going to see this stuff. What are you going to do when you see it? Come talk to me. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be shy. We need to talk about this. Ask your teen what they're doing on social media. Do you let them have an account? How much cell phone time do you let them have? There are kids that have cell phones that, they're 8 years old or younger. They have cell phones. And why are we giving that kind of power to a child? And teenagers, what do they need a cell phone for? Like, what are they using it for? I know there are some parents that have really limited that. Educate yourself about the latest apps, websites, and social media pages teens are using. And it's growing all the time, so it's really hard. But really, Google what is the most popular teen social app, and then be aware of what it is. So, back in my day, it was, what music are you listening to? That was what the parents were, and I remember, and Sean probably remembers this, our youth group, maybe once a year or once every couple of years, we'd watch a video series. I know video, like video cassettes, called Hell's Bells. And it was about, oh yeah, yeah. And what it was is Hell's Bells was about all this secular music that was, and they would show how music played backwards is wrong, and they would talk about, they would show different clips of musicians and the evil in the music and stuff like that. So they really, and then we would get passionate, we would burn all our tapes, or we would throw all our cassette tapes out, and then probably we'd go buy them again. I don't know, like it was just one of those things. And I think I told a story last time that my mom, when she was young, she had Elvis records that she hid. So, music was one way that we would try to find our rebellion. I know for me, I had headsets, that I listened to my music. And so my mom didn't know my favorite band was Metallica. I mean, that was my band. And sure, I had Christian music like White Cross and stuff like that too, but Metallica was what I would go to when I was feeling angry, right? So some of this music would feed that. But now we have to be concerned, right, about all this online stuff. The next issue is peer pressure. While peer pressure has affected teens for generations, social media brings it to a whole new level. Sexting, for example, is a major cause for concern. When I was working with TNT Youth Ministry, I had multiple kids talk to me about, especially guys were asking for pictures, or guys would send pictures to girls, not realizing that girls are not as visual as what guys are. And so, and let's be honest, girls aren't looking at a picture and going, oh, wow, that's awesome. They don't do that, right? It's just different. But that's child pornography. They didn't realize that either. And that's reportable. That's being arrested. You can be arrested for that stuff. And so, but the problem is it grows more and more. And the other thing is once these kids don't realize that once you send these pictures out there, they're out there, and if they're thinking, well, I'll just delete it, guess what? Taking pictures off the internet or getting them off the internet is like taking the pee out of a swimming pool. You can't, it's in there, right? You have to, it's gone. And so we just have to make the kids aware. Peer pressure also is if kids don't have certain technology, certain clothing, Air Jordan shoes. If they don't have the right kind of Air Jordan shoes, that's a problem. Or if there's a crease in their Air Jordan shoes, they can be made fun of for that, right? And I know we all as teenagers have dealt with that peer pressure for one form or another. For me, it was high tops with the big shoelaces, and you didn't tie them. And you could literally take your shoe and it would fly because it wasn't tied, right? And if you didn't have these fluorescent, bold, big laces, you weren't cool. And I remember having that. I also remember popping the collar, right? We all popped the collar. You remember that, right? And the mullet would hang over the collar. That was cool, right? And if I didn't have, Hawaiian shirts, that was really popular when I was a teen too. And so if I didn't have a Hawaiian shirt, my first shirt, man, I wore it all the time because I thought this was so cool. And also because I wanted to press the girls, right? And it goes on and on and on. But peer pressure is a major problem, and it still is. And it can become crowd pressure to the point where, oh, you didn't have sex yet. Everybody has sex. You should be having sex, right? And so there's this crowd pressure that goes with it as well. Where am I at here? Another thing we have to recognize too is that with this peer pressure, a lot of the kids are falling into the trap of not knowing how to solve conflict. And we are seeing that across the board, even in the therapy room. We're seeing that across the board, that people don't know how to solve conflict, and the fact that social media, texting, that's how we solve conflict. We get online, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this drives me insane. These 2 words on a social media post: I'm done. I hate that. Because what is that? What done with what? And where am I going to go? Oh, my word, are they okay? Are they done with life? I need to investigate this. Now, usually I don't comment or anything. I'm just, because there's plethora of comments. "Oh, are you okay?" Da da da. And then they'll start commenting, "Yeah, it was just a rough day. I'm just done with work." Oh, okay. Well, we got you. It's just, and then I get my affirmation, right? Or they make these other comments. I remember a teen one time, a girl had broken up with them, and they went on their Facebook and they said, such and such broke up with me. I hope the next boy you date rapes you and you get pregnant. Wow. Unbelievable. And so this social media we have this power to do these destructive things, and we think we have the right, but we don't. We shouldn't. Especially with that kind of thing. We're hurting people. So, bottom line is, we need to help our teenagers find healthy ways to make amends with people. We need to help them to learn to listen and avoid overreacting and judging. I remember years ago, there was a teen that I was talking to, and they were like, "I'm so mad. This person was on Facebook, or they were texting, or something, social media, and they called me a whore, and they called me the S word," right? And I'm just like, okay. And I'm going to go on my Facebook and I'm going to blast them and I'm going to tell them all that stuff. And I said, stop. Can I ask you a question? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, is it true? Oh my, no, it's not true. How could you say that? I'm saying, if it's not true, let it die. They're trying to get you. They're trying to get you upset, and it's working. You're giving them power over you. And you feeding the fire isn't going to help. Now, I don't agree. I think we need to stick up for ourselves, and we need to nip bullying in the bud, right? But I think some of these situations, you're feeding toxic people, and they're just eating it, and hurt people, right? So there's a balance there too. Okay, we have to be careful what we're feeding and what we're reacting to. I would encourage you parents, when it comes to online stuff, let them know it's safe. You're a safe person to come to, even when they have problems and they make poor choices, because they will, because they're impulsive and they'll post something that they shouldn't, right? And maybe it's not necessarily a sexual thing, but maybe it's just a stupid, comment or something, right? Another thing is on-screen violence. Teens are going to witness violence in media, at one time or another. And it's not just TV, it's music and movies that depict violence. But violence it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. One of the most popular movies that came out over the Halloween season was called Terrifier 3. And apparently there's 3 of these movies, but they get worse and worse and worse, where people have actually passed out in the theater and thrown up. They would give barf bags in the theater to people because it's that violent and gross. And this movie made more money than all the other movies that came out at that time, which is a little terrifying. That's what terrifying for me of that movie, Terrifier 3. It terrifies me that people want to see this. But we're seeing this. But and not only that, we're seeing it also in video games. A lot of kids love Black Ops, the Call of Duty. Call of Duty 6, I think, is out right now. Fortnite is also a shoot 'em game, and yes, you're building things, and it's not as bloody, but still, kids love it. And you know what I attribute some of this stuff to is it's a modern version of tag, right? Where they're going around, I got you, right? I got you. But the violence it can bring in kids, watch your kids. If they're screaming, throwing their controllers and stuff, it's moved on beyond, this. Ha! Gotcha! Found you! Right? It's moving on. Or paintball, or that kind of stuff. Like, it's moving on to the point of, I want you dead, right? So there's some concern here. Again, there's balance. Watch the emotional expression, right? Again, if kids are breaking stuff because of video games, that's not fun, right? When I think of video games, I think of relaxing and laughing and having fun, like Mario Party or Mario Kart, right? Those are classics. But if I'm getting mad if I'm playing a video game, and I do like video games, okay? So I grew up with a Nintendo, the first Nintendo ever made. I grew up with one of those. I now, as an adult, if I'm getting mad at a video game, I'm done with it. I'm not playing it because I have enough stress in my life. I don't need that, right? So, again, we got to restrict how or limit our teen from watching a lot of R-rated movies or playing M-rated video games, okay? I think you should just really restrict that stuff and just say, hey, that's not happening. Talk to them about the dangers of exposed to violent images and monitor your teen's mental state, again, like I said. The next thing would be that kids are dealing with is anxiety and depression. Um, Anxiety, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, an estimated 5 million adolescents in the U.S. have had at least one major depressive episode. That's a lot. That means 20% of American teenagers may experience depression before reaching adulthood. And we are seeing that grow. I mean, I'm seeing more anxiety than ever, especially in the therapy room. Whether it's a lot of social anxiety, a lot of separation anxiety coming in with children, but then also teenagers dealing with a depressed mood. And basically, the evidence is starting to show we're spending too much time on screens. We were created for one-to-one relationship. And this is the way we're creating, this is the way we're spending our time, which is just, I believe it's divisive. I believe it's creating distance. And it's not going to go away. It's going to increase. And so we need to really monitor this and also really create space for us to be spending time one-on-one with our teens, like taking them to breakfast, taking them to run errands, hanging out with them one-on-one. So important. It's so important. Again, if you start to see some of these things, if they're experiencing the FOMO, fear of missing out, that comes from social media. Those kinds of things, like, oh my word, I gotta get online. I gotta play video games. I gotta do this. Keep in mind that these feelings end up leading to loneliness and isolation. So they need more connection. Youth group is so important. I can't say that enough. Just a youth group is so pivotal. Getting them around other teens. Exposure to that, I think, is so important. Sports is another thing that's really healthy. Exercise, those kind of things. Even taking your son, daughter, and going to the gym with them and working out. I think that's huge. Going for a run, going for a walk, doing those kinds of things. Keep in mind, depressive disorders, anxiety can be treatable. It's important to seek professional help when it's beyond, when it's getting to a lot, and be willing to discuss those feelings. I mean, I'm thankful that in today's culture, it's more open for us to talk about mental health stuff than when I was growing up, right? When we were growing up, it was like, just get over it. Like, stop it. You're not, And I was always a very nervous person. I was nervous. I had anxiety for years. Going on dates was frightening to me. It was frightening to me to go on dates with my wife. My first date with Donna, my wife now, I didn't eat the entire day. That's how nervous I was. Because a girlfriend prior, I had thrown up on a date because I was so nervous. So I was not going to make that mistake with her. And guess what? I got married to her, so it worked. So, but bottom line is, I was very nervous. But for me, it was just like, oh, he's just nervous. But there were some core beliefs in there about my own, who I was, and performance-oriented person, that I had to measure up to this certain standard that was creating this anxiety. And guess what? At 50, it's still kind of there, right? Another one is bullying, which we've heard lots about bullying, but again, we need to be aware of that thing and again nip it in the bud. I gotta really keep moving here. Sexual activity: 64% of young people aged 13 to 24 actively seek out porn weekly or more often. 13 to 24. 90%, and this is 64% of young people. That is astronomical. 90% of boys and 60% of girls are exposed to online porn before the age of 18. Here's the one that scares you the most. The largest consumers of online pornography are 12 to 17-year-old boys. They're the largest consumers. And here's the thing about pornography companies. If they know they can get you at 12, they'll have you for life. And so they will try to find ways to get them. It's disgusting. It's demonic. And the average age of the first exposure to porn is 11 years old. And now with OnlyFans, we have teens leaving high school and saying, rather than getting a job, I'm going to go on make an OnlyFans where people can subscribe to me, and I'll make content that's pornographic or sexually intended, and that's how I'll make my money. And they say, I'm in control of, here's the narrative, I'm in control of my body, I'm doing it, and so it empowers me. No, it's actually minimalizing you to your sexuality. And there's so much more to you. And so we are in a battle. We are in a battle. The decline in just the way we see purity is really, really sad. Having sex before marriage, that just does not seem like a big deal anymore. Moving in together before we get married, that's commonplace. And so how do we get back to the place of what God's design for relationship, dating, and sex should be? It's a big thing, and it's against our culture. I mean, just look at like football games and look at the halftime shows, and what are we seeing? It's so sexualized in so many ways. And so, I mean, it's everywhere. It's billboards, it's music, it's magazines. You walk to the grocery store and they're Cosmopolitan, 8 ways to have the best sex of your life. And it's just everywhere. We're saturated. Our country worships the God of sex. And so we are battling this. And so we need to talk to our teen about sex and allow them to ask questions. There's no longer we can say, well, you'll see, we'll talk about it, or hush, hush, we don't talk about it. In my culture growing up, it was like, you don't talk about it, you don't talk about it, you don't talk about it. Oh, you're married now? Go have it. Then it makes it into this way of, oh, I can? This is weird, right? I remember our our premarital counseling, and again, I'm not against, this is the way they did it, and that's fine, and I respect and I honor the pastors that did this, with us, but they gave us a book at the last session we had with them, and it was a book about sex. And they said, don't read it until you're married. Oh, okay, well, I thumbed through it anyway, and there's drawn pictures of sexual positions and stuff. I'm like, oh, look at this, Donna, or whatever. But bottom line is like, this is taboo. This is wrong. So when you finally get to the honeymoon night, it's this feeling of kind of guilt, but excitement, and it was awkward and weird. Well, we should say, no, this is a gift from the Lord. And I know this is awkward to talk about, but I'd rather you hear the good way. If God created sex, which he did, doesn't he know the best way to have it? Absolutely, right? So we want to talk about this, and we want to answer questions you have, and we want to be available. I know it's awkward, but let's talk about it. Do your best not to shame them or make them feel embarrassed about their inquiries. Instill the importance of safe sex practices, even if you don't think your child is engaging in sexual activity. This is a tough one for church people. They're like, man, I don't want to talk to my kids about having safe sex because then they'll have sex. Agreed. I can see that point of view, but at the same point, I think we need to just make them aware. I think we need to give the information, because at some point, they're going to be alone with somebody, right? And obviously, we want them to make really good choices. And we, again, want them to make godly choices, but we can't control certain situations. But we want them to be healthy all the way around. And so we